Okay, now that we have some animation built into our home screen, on our next screen, the Learn, we're going to build in some interactivity so that this user gets a little bit of feedback. So what I've done is I've created 3 rectangles. I've cloned those, and now I'm going to create them as touch points that lay over the top of the sides of my triangle. Because what I want my end user to be able to do is be able to tap on one of the sides of the triangle and get some feedback based off of whether they understand which side is which. So these 3 rectangles now that lay over the 3 sides of that right triangle are in place, and I will change their opacity so that you don't really see them. But before I do that, I'm going to make them touch points. So in the inspector, I'm going to go over to the actions, and on mouse click, I'm going to send that to start a specific timeline. Now I'm going to create a new timeline, and this new timeline is going to be whether or not they got the correct choice. So in this case, I'm going to just name my timeline correct hypotenuse or correct choice, and over in my timeline down at the bottom you can see that now my new timeline says correct hypotenuse. And now I'm going to create an animation, and that animation will play a response for my end user to know that they either got it correct or they got it incorrect. On this particular animation, it was the correct choice, so they're going to get a thumbs up, and they'll get a little text box response that says correct, and then they'll also get an arrow that navigates onto that screen and allows them to go to the next practice. So I'm going to take that thumbs up and the text box, and I'm going to group them together, and I'm going to move them off the page. So now I'm also going to bring in that arrow that allows my user to go on to the next practice, and I'm going to move that off the page as well. That will also be a part of my animation after they've correctly chosen the correct side. Now I'm going to create my animation. I drag my timeline out to the point at which I want to start recording. I press the red record button, and I make changes to the objects that are on the screen. Again, the blue bars indicate that there's going to be an animation that's played. Next, I'm going to add a pause to my timeline because I want the end user to be able to see the response. So timeline actions, and I'm going to click pause timeline, and therefore when it gets to that point in the timeline, it will pause. Now while I'm still recording, I'm actually going to animate the text box back off the screen. However, that text box won't be animated off the screen until that timeline is unpaused or restarted. And I'm also going to animate the arrow to the right back onto the screen, and I'm going to make sure that animation only starts after the pause timeline by clicking on its blue box and dragging it out till it gets to after that pause timeline. Next thing I want to do is I want to make sure that when the hypotenuse is tapped, the correct hypotenuse timeline is played. I check my action inspection, everything looks good. Next, I'm going to select my continue timeline, and the continue timeline will continue when my correct box is tapped, and that's why it says tap to close. Alright, I'm going to do the same thing now for my other 2 sides which produce the wrong choice. So I'm going to select the 2 sides that are not the hypotenuse, create my new timeline called wrong choice. I'm going to drag out my big red try again indicator, and I'm going to add a little text to that, just reminding them where the hypotenuse is. This will give my end user a little bit of feedback and help them learn the different sides of a right triangle. Finally, I'm going to create my animation for this timeline. Notice that my timeline says wrong choice. I'm going to move my playhead out to where I want it to animate onto. I press the red button, and I make the changes on my canvas. I'm also going to do the same thing here. I'm going to add a pause timeline action at this point, and I'm also going to then animate my box back off the screen. And to restart my timeline, I'm going to make the action that restarts the timeline the box. Therefore, when it says tap to close, they'll have to tap on that to restart the timeline or to continue the timeline. Alright, again, this is all previewable. I'm going to change the opacity, by the way, of these boxes so that it doesn't look actually like they're grayed out boxes, but you can actually see the triangle. And we're going to preview this in our built-in previewer. And you can see it animates on. And now I have these touch points. I will tap to close this. I get my feedback. And if I tap on the hypotenuse, I see that it is correct. Tap to close it, and I get my arrow to the next page.